Hi, my name's Matt Otwell, and in this video I'm going to talk about hybrid recording guitar rigs. In this context, hybrid refers to a mix of analog, both tube and solid state, and digital, including modelling and impulse responses. This video isn't about evaluating the pros and cons of different technologies, but about how guitar players can use a variety of gear in an integrated way. Remember, no matter the cost, every device has creative potential. I'm going to begin by going through the devices, and then we'll look at signal paths and the various ways to combine them with tone examples. In this rig, we've got two bits of furniture. There's a trolley rack down here, so this is a 19-inch rack device on casters. And then we have a cabinet up here, also on casters, but this tends to stay against the wall. We're not expecting to move this one. And that's got a variety of amplifiers. And on top, we've got a pedal board. This is a pedal board that would not normally need to be operated by foot. So there are no expression pedals on here. And that's linked up down here with a small floorboard, which does have foot-operated pedals, primarily a volume pedal and a wah-wah pedal. Let's start with the cabinet, and down here we've got 4 tube amp heads, and we've got the aux, which, as you probably know, houses impulse responses of cabinets, microphones and rooms. That's an alternative to miking up a cabinet. Up here we've got a pedal board, and it's divided into 4 loops, if you like. There's a loop of drive pedals, which normally would go in front of the amplifier. And then a second loop up here of modulation or time domain effects pedals, and we'd normally place that loop in the effects loop of an amplifier. There's a slicer which is separate, and then down here there are 3 pedals which are connected to the G system, and we'll come back to those. Now up here there's some of the stuff that routes the signals. So obviously we have a power supply. We have an amplifier and speaker cab selector, so you can connect and turn on up to 8 amplifiers, tube or solid state, and 4 cabinets, and switch immediately between them. Below that, I've got an analog patch bay that contains all the connections for the loops, the send and returns to the loops. Also the effects returns, send and returns for the individual amplifier heads, the G system, the quad Cortex, the Boss SY300, the ins and outs for the guitars, so everything is patchable on this patch bay. Anything can be connected to anything else. And then over here we have the TC Electronic G system, and that is simply the brain for the floorboard. You can detach them and they connect via an Ethernet cable. So that's that cabinet. The second bit of furniture is this rack trolley, and it's got the floorboard controller for the TC Electronic G system. Underneath that there is a neural DSP quad Cortex, and below that there are 3 Eventide H9 pedals, and these are linked to the quad Cortex. We'll come back to that. And then finally down the bottom here there is a Boss guitar synthesizer, the SY300. At the very bottom here there are some inputs that allow guitars to be connected to either the G system or the quad Cortex or the SY300. Instead of routing around the back of them here, plugging in cables, they've simply been brought out to this patch bay. You'll notice that each of these 3 devices has an input and an expression pedal. And at the very bottom here, if we pull this out, is an expression pedal. So we can connect the expression pedal to any one of those 3 devices, and obviously the guitar we're going to use. At the top here we've got an iPad. It's an old iPad, and it runs the Eventide H9 software for these 3 devices down here. So we can edit them on this iPad, and I'll show you that in a moment. This iPad also runs the aux editing software for the aux box up here, and I'll show you that as well. Round the back, if we turn it round, we have the power supply strip for all of this, and we have a snake, a cable snake that goes off up into this rack up here and to the patch bay. and of course to the G system. The final piece of the puzzle down here is a small floorboard which has got pedals on it that need to be first in the signal chain if we're using a traditional guitar setup. So we've got a tuner, we've got a compressor. Of course they could be up here on this board above, but that would require running extra lengths of cables and we don't want to do that. Then we have a volume pedal. We've got an envelope filter which is purely here because it works well in this order, and then there is a wah-wah pedal. Again, this board comes up on the patch bay. Let's start with a fairly traditional guitar signal path. We can plug a guitar into our floorboard down here. The signal from that will come up here into the patch bay. We can then go directly into the amp selector, into a head amp, or before we do that we can patch into a loop, for example the distortion and overdrive loop there, and then go into the amp selector. That would send the signal to the amp. We can come out of the effects loop, that's obviously post preamp, and then go back to the patch bay where we can go into one of those loops up there with the modulation pedals on it, come back into the amp, through the power amp section of this amplifier, and then out to the aux, and obviously use the cabinet, mic and room IRs, stereo out of that to our audio interface. Now I think you can see that's very flexible. Because of the patch bay, we can use the floorboard or not. We can use a distortion pedal in front of the amp or not. And we can use modulation pedals in the effects loop of the amp or not. And we can do that for all these amps that have effects loops in them. Some of you will know that the Fender Dulux does not have an effects loop in it, but this system does give us a lot of flexibility in how we can choose an amp and how we can feed the signal through it and into our audio interface. The next signal path example I'm going to talk about uses the Neural DSP Quad Cortex. Now I'm not going to talk about this device in detail, there are plenty of other videos out there on it, but one of the features of it is that it has an effects send and return, and what I've done is I've placed into that loop these three Eventide H9 effects pedals. Just come back here for a moment. I've actually got a Fender Blackface amp, so I'm putting this effects loop before the amp and of course before the cabinet. So it's a fairly clean signal path going all the way through. From there, the outputs of the Quad Cortex go back to the patch bay. Now at the moment, I'm just sending those straight out to the audio interface, but they could go through one of these amps and through the aux, or just the aux if we wanted to. Okay, this is just the clean sound. It's a Fender Blackface amp model. Very nice, so let's engage the H9s here, And we can just do this from the front here. I'll just put on some micro pitch. Very pleasant. I of course can do this from either the panels down here or up here. If I go to the H2 here, so the H902, the second one here, which will load in, and I will just go and look at its presets. It's on a beauty echo, so let's activate that. Of course, we can edit the mix here just by moving our finger on the screen, touch screen of course. If we go back to our algorithms here and select the third H9 over here and go to our presets here, we've got a shimmer reverb on here, which is nice. So this is a beautiful combination of the Eventide H9s and the quad Cortex. Really beautiful, very straightforward, programmable from the iPad of course, and we could run this through the aux, but we're using a jazz guitar here with flat wounds on it and it sounds great. I want to tell you a little bit about these Eventide H9s. The H9 was or is available in two forms. The Max, which has all of Eventide's algorithms that they've been developing for 30 or 40 years, and the Core, which just has a small selection. Now, if you buy a Max, which will cost you a few pounds, or a few dollars if you're in the States, of course, you can buy cores, which I've done, on eBay at a very low price. These are cores and this is a Max. Each of these cores cost me £250. And if you register your Max at Eventide, you're automatically entitled to update your cores to the Max software. So these are 3 Maxes. Of course, if you deregister, they go back to being cores. But this is a really cost-effective way of running 3 fantastic Eventide algorithms simultaneously. Okay, the third signal path is just dead simple, and that's this Boss SY300 guitar synthesizer. And I have this running through a chorus pedal, then it goes to the Fender Dulux reverb amp, and then to the aux, which is running a kind of Fenderish 1x12 cabinet. Of course, we need an appropriate guitar for that 80s vibe. The fourth signal path is a real hybrid between old school digital and analog, and this involves using the G system. So a guitar is plugged into the patch panel down here. The signal is sent to the G system brain where it is digitized. It's then passed through the filter, which would be a wah-wah pedal for example, and the compressor. And after that, if you choose, it is converted into analog and can be sent out via these 3 loops to any pedal that you want. I've got 3 drive pedals up there. From there you can send the signal into the preamplifier of one of the amplifiers there, and I've got obviously that on the patch bay. From there it can come back out, it's re-digitized into the G system. Remember, it's coming back out of the effects send, of course, of your head amp, through these modulation pedals, modulation, pitch, delay and reverb. And from there you can send it back into the effects return of your amplifier, through the power amp section, and then onto your cab, or in this case the aux box. For this demo we just have a Les Paul standard with burst bucker, humbuckers on it. We're using the Marshall Jubilee on the clean setting, although with a Les Paul it'll never be clean. And we've got a 4x4 cabinet in the aux. Got nothing on this at all at the moment except for a bit of compression. So let's try a little bit of the Boss Overdrive, which is on the first loop here. We can put some delay on this. Bit of reverb. We can try another pedal up here. There's a J-Rad Archer pedal. We could also just take this loop off and let's put the Marshall into a crunch sound. I think that should do it. Take the delay off maybe. Yeah. Well, those are just a few tone examples. You can probably tell that guitar isn't my first instrument, but I love to play it and I love to mess around and find new ways to connect the gear together. It's possible to buy so much gear second-hand cheaply, and some of the gear here was a bit more expensive, but most of it was eBay and Reverb finds. And there's nothing like the joy of finding a new bit of gear that's new to you and not worrying about what anyone else has to say about it, whether it's fashionable or not, and just creating something that means something to you. And after all, that's why we do this, isn't it? It's just the complete joy of music and electronics and technology. So thanks very much for watching. I do have a new album out called Axiomatic, which I will link, and there's a couple of videos I've made for it. And you can hear all this gear being used in it. So once again, thanks for watching.